Welcome to Roots of Faith. I'm Renee Richard, and today we're here in Donaldsonville, Louisiana. This town sits on the Mississippi River at the mouth of Bayou Lafourche. It has a very, very rich heritage here. The original lands where this town sits were part of the Chitimacha tribe in the 1600s, early 1700s. We know that from French missionaries that visited this area in the early 1700s, even before New Orleans or Natchitoches were established, which are our oldest settlements. And it was here, though, that the Spanish government, when we were under Spanish rule, brought the first church. And that church was for the Acadian settlers that came here. So join us as we explore the rich and varied history of the great parish of Ascension of our Lord. As my guest today, Father Ghee. He's pastor here at Ascension Catholic Church, and I guess the official name would be Ascension of our Lord Jesus Christ of the Fork
of the
Chitimacha. Fork of the Chitimachas.
That's right.
Of course, that's written in Spanish in our books, but it's long and lengthy, which has some historical significance that we'll talk about in a little bit. But thank you for being my guest today.
Well, welcome, Renee, to this historic and beautiful Church of Ascension.
It is. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself, though, and your journey to the priesthood and your work here.
I was ordained in 2008 along with Father Jamin David, Father Andrew Merrick, on the feast of Our Lady of the May 31st. It's the visitation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on that great day, the three of us were ordained, and since then I've been serving in different parishes as an associate, St. Aloysius 1 year, Our Lady of Mercy, Denham Springs, a few months as an administrator for the Independence, Madre Dolorosa, and then I've been here as a pastor since 2011, so it's my 8 years going on here.
That's great. So you've had a nice stay here, but also Father Ghee is also our chancellor at the diocese. You have the bishop is, of course, head of the diocese, and then the vicar general, and you fall right under that. And actually, you're head of us in archives, so he's actually the archivist technically for the diocese, but and we love having him as our boss. So he's also in an administrative position, and you're also pastor of St. Francis of Assisi, because this is a cluster here.
That's correct.
It's two parishes, close proximity. What, about 4 or 5 miles difference? What's the difference?
Actually, it's only about less than 10-minute drive from here.
Oh, wow. Okay, so very close, and we will come back and do a whole show just on St. Francis of Assisi. Yeah. So you have you wear a lot of hats.
No, it's been a great privilege. It was 2015 when Father Ton Vu died as Vicar General, and that's when Father Tom Ranzino was chosen as the Vicar General, and then they were looking for somebody, and so I was chosen as the Chancellor.
Very good. Yeah. So tell us a little bit. We're here in this historic parish, and I mean, really, this is one of the original churches founded for the Acadians that came. Right. This church has its roots really in this same area, on the same close site, since 1772 is when it was actually established. I think they know that there was a chapel here earlier than that, because the Acadians first came to this region in the late 1760s. And we do have the writings from the Spanish government that give us a lot of information about those early years. I believe this actual church that we're in now is third or fourth church, fourth church actually, but it's old too. Y'all will be celebrating, what is it, 250 years? 1875 is when it started for the construction of this one. But
the amazing thing about, I think, this church and community is that back in 1704, a Spanish Franciscan Capuchin was sent here for the mission of the Indians, the Chitimachas Indian tribe. And so ever since then, I think the King of Spain has decreed a establishment of parish here in 1772, as you mentioned. And for 100 years, until 1872, there were 22 missionary priests sent out of the country from here to minister in this parish.
Well, you figured the settlers in that time too. We were a missionary territory, So, but that's an amazing number in 100 years. We talk about priests being in a parish for 13 years. Look at, the turnover. Of course, you had yellow fever. You had so many different things going on.
Right.
But there were a lot, yes,
Right.
a lot of missionary priests.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a good thing there, because like that Chitimacha tribe, that was 1704. So you're looking at 50 or 60 years before they permanently came under the Spanish
Right.
government. But those early missionaries that came here, that came in 74, he was an axe seneca. I mean, he was murdered by the Indians there. But because of that, the king was able to use that as a bargaining chip to move the Chitimacha out of this area, to claim this area for settlers, because it was such an important site. Number one, it's very high ground, and it's at the convergence of Bayou Lafourche, which means the fork. That's why I stumbled through the title in the beginning, because we say Lafourche now, but in English it would be the fork of the river, of the Mississippi River. And so back then, we didn't have roads. I mean, this Mississippi River was their interstate, which I say over and over again in shows. And then again, Bayou Lafourche, a major waterway, is another smaller highway. So this was key property,
Right. See, I never understood why they would put as the state capital here.
It was here. It was here.
But I
for a
understand
year.
now, as because there was no major roadways, this river was it. And I knew, looking at some old pictures of this Donaldsonville area, I mean, this was a center of the commerce. Things were happening, the merchants, industries, and things were being brought back and forth into this area.
Riverboats,
And so
showboats.
now I understand why.
It
we
was
ev-
what it was.
Yeah, and they had that. I know we have an interesting restaurant called First and Last Chance, where the railroad comes from the New Orleans and it stops here, and goes. I think went to Baton Rouge, right?
Probably
Yeah.
so. Yeah, I didn't realize it was named for that. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
First and Last Chance to get on the railroad train. Yeah.
And when you were talking just a few minutes ago about it being the center of commerce here at this fork, one of the things that it's known for in our whole diocese too is the different cultures that came to Donaldsonville because of that. At that time, Bayou Lafourche was attached, and Bayou Lafourche went out to the Gulf. So it was another exit to get away from the yellow fever epidemics. The steamboats would take them, out into the Gulf to some of the islands like Last Island, Grand Isle, down Bayou Lafourche. But the people that came here, this is the only area in our diocese where it's documented, where we have early settlers from not just French. We have the Acadians, which this church was built for. Shortly afterwards, we had the Canary Islanders that came to this area specifically, including land grants. With the Haitian Revolution, which was Saint-Domingue, this is one area where Saint-Domingue refugees came, which we don't see elsewhere. Most of them stayed around New Orleans, but there was quite a few that came here. Of course, the African Americans who were here from the beginning, because they were brought in, unfortunately enslaved. And then last but not least, the last immigrant group really to come, the Italians.
Right. Yeah, but the other thing interesting is I found was that there was a significant number of Jewish people here.
Right.
We have a synagogue here. That's
Is
now,
there still one?
Well, it's now converted to Ace Hardware Store.
Oh, okay.
But the other thing was that we had some German POWs they stayed here. And so it's got a really interesting history.
And with that German POW camp, Father Landsman, who ends up pastored in Napoleonville for years and years and years, he was actually associate pastor here after he came. They brought him, they encouraged him. He came to minister to the Germans in the POW camp. We were talking about all the different missionary priests that have come and have served here. And what would happen over time is that our early bishops, we didn't have native-born priests. So our bishops would go to Europe and recruit men in the seminary, boys in the seminary, other ordained priests to come here to serve in our mission. And one of the priests even established a seminary in this region, in Platonville, for the purpose of training and getting us native-born priests. But that didn't last. It ended up burning down. And even prior to that, on one of his trips, I guess, to get more recruits, he brought a young man from Lyon, France, and
he was ordained here. And I think this was the first ordination of priests in Louisiana.
In the state of Louisiana. And it occurred in this church, which is fascinating. Yeah. And talking about education, you do have a school here. It's an parochial school, correct? So it's K through 12. It covers it all and draws from all the surrounding area as well, right?
Yeah, all the way down to all the parishes around Lafourche, Bayou, and then also as well St. James,
Wow.
and as far as Vacherie as well.
Oh, goodness.
We used to have
that
a
is.
bus that used to carry students from all that way back there.
That's it.
Now we have a bus that carries across the river and goes into even the Gonzales area even.
As part of the school system?
Yeah.
The Catholic school system?
Yeah.
So that's amazing. And really, this is the oldest, or one of the oldest,
Yeah.
I think the oldest in continuous use schools for our diocese.
Right. Looking at the old pictures of this parish and pictures of how people fondly remember the sisters. And the sisters that they remember are the Daughters of Charity with that the flying
wings,
nun,
the flying nun habit.
They were very loved and endeared in this parish. Of course, they're buried right in our cemetery, all of them grouped together. But they started here a long time ago, an
Yeah.
orphanage.
Yeah, in the 1840s, so very early on.
And then I heard something about cannonball.
Oh,
That being
okay.
shot during the.
You need to go over to the school because the hole is still there. I think the cannonball's still in the hole.
Okay.
But in the 1860s, the original building or part of the building is still standing, and they use it, I think, as offices now because it's not real stable. But Donaldsonville was bombarded in the Civil War. It's even documented in your baptismal register in the side margin, which was common for priests to mark historical events. And we see it, and we saw it in New Orleans with the Battle of 1812.
Okay.
And that's one of the comments that you're the only one in our diocese, I think, that has a historical marker for the Civil War. And it says bombed today, and it gives the date. I think it was might have been August 9th.
Wow.
Don't quote me on dates. I don't remember. But in the side margin, it says that we were bombed. And when they did the bomb, the church did survive, the school did survive, but a cannonball went through the roof and landed, but it didn't explode. And so the nuns considered it a miracle, and that it's been preserved. So that if you walk in and ask, I would imagine the nuns are no longer here. I think they left in the 80s. But that is so famous, and it's known around Donaldsonville that there's a cannonball from the Civil War that's still in the school. And but another interesting thing about the education here and about the founders of education here is they go back to saints or holy people that we talked about in an earlier series. For instance, you have I think it was the Sisters of Charity of St. Joseph, or the Daughters of Charity of St. Joseph, that ended up merging with the Daughters of Charity. And the original group that came was connected to Mother Seton.
Yeah. So I always wondered why there was a first-class relic of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in this church. And that explains why.
Yeah, I didn't know there was a relic. I knew that she was instrumental in those early years with that order. And she was very pleased when they merged with the Daughters of Charity, who were here. But then also...
St. Catherine Drexel came here as well.
Yes, St. Catherine was here because another church here in town that we will be showcasing, but you are not, it's not part of the cluster. It's a church for African Americans that was established by St. Catherine Drexel in the 1920s. It pertains to education because the earlier school there was called St. Augustine for African American children, again, started in the 1880s, early on, and it was Henriette DeLille, who we have done shows on as well, and she's on the path to become a saint, we hope, a Creole woman from New Orleans who founded the Sisters of the Holy Family. And they were brought here to start St. Augustine. And then it eventually became connected with St. Catherine Drexel and St. Catherine's, changed the name to St. Catherine's, and it ended up merging with the Daughters of Charity, I think in the 1960s with desegregation, and also the Brothers of the Sacred Heart were here. They came in the 1800s, and they had a school for boys. And so all three kind of come together.
We have some celebrities who graduated out here, like James Carville, for example.
Oh, okay.
Now, they would say that this is the Catholic high. It's because this is the older one, the one that Brothers of the Sacred Heart started, because the one in Baton Rouge was started later.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
But a lot of the brothers that Brothers of Sacred Heart we know, so we love, they all served here, and many of them had a great experiences here teaching.
Yeah, so your Catholic education in this area really goes back. It's got a fabulous history, and it's still an active school. It's still,
it is,
yeah.
It draws from areas all the way
over.
from Vacherie, St. James, all down the Bayou Lafourche, and so it's a great ministry that this parish and the school does.
we've talked about the history of this beautiful church. We've talked about education, and we're here in this church. Tell us some of the things that you've done in your pastorate here for this facility that, here.
Sure. This church is so historic. I mean, finished in the 1890s, 90s set. It's a constant upkeep,
Obviously.
of course. And generations of priests have done a lot of work to keep this place going. And the parishioner has been very generous to keep this very unique, sort of a European cathedral-style church in a great shape. And what I remember what I know from is that Father Wagesbeck added some of the administration building on here. That was major work in the 1980s when Father Randy was here, Randy Cuevas, with the assistance of all the parishioners. They put the cupola back, the steeple back on this church, which I think was missing for 60 years since the Hurricane Betsy has blown
Even
has damaged
before Betsy,
it. Yeah.
I think it was the 1930s. And folks, if you've never traveled down here, the steeple is like an icon on the river because you can see this church over the cane fields. Right. The steeple is so tall.
Right.
And so it's nice to have it back because they talked about in the old days, they would identify this church, the boats coming down the river by the steeple in this church. But in the 1930s, from what I was doing when I was researching here, it was wooden, and they were afraid with another storm that it would crash down. I think in the 1920s, they had a storm that came through that broke a lot of the windows, and those had to be repaired. So it was taken down and never put back up.
Right.
So it was Father Cuevas' administration that put that would have been like in the
1990s.
80s?
1990s,
okay. That they put the steeple
and
back
then
on.
a lot of folks here remember when the steeple was on the ground, they were given the opportunity to go inside and mark with their names.
Oh, my
goodness.
goodness.
And so the steeple has lots of the parishioners' names in there, so it's a very fascinating.
I do remember in 2002 or 2000 when Lee and I first started Roots of Faith, she went in the tower, and I think she photographed that. And Stephen may have put that in the show, but I may have to dig up some of those photographs. So she may have photographed that. I didn't know that aspect of it.
Yeah, for the past 10 years with Father Phil and us here, we have added a new air conditioning system. When Father Phil was here, we repainted the entire interior of the inside. And then just recently, last year, we have refinished the original wood floor from the 1890s and stained it new. And then we had pews that were installed here since Betsy, because Betsy blew out, damaged the church heavily. And so the pastor at the time put a new, sort of modern-looking pews then, but that served us quite well until last year.
50 years or so,
Until
yes.
we had a company that's in the Amish country to come and install these pews that kind of look like what we originally had in the photos.
Right, I did not, when I walked in, because I've been here many, many times, my grandmother was from here, and walking in, I didn't realize that the pews had been changed out. It blends in so beautifully. Right. But you were telling me you repaired statues that you found had horsehair.
Right.
From the plaster.
I think they repainted the statues in the 1990s with Father Randy, and then we had to do a few others recently. And then as they were retouching it, they found out who the manufacturer was, when it was manufactured, around 1920s.
Oh, okay.
And then the way they manufactured was using horsehair and plaster. I thought that was very fascinating how they did that.
Yeah. Now, not to forget also, the altar is elevated, and beneath the altar,
right.
It
used to be, I think, just a storage area, okay. But I think in the 80s they made it into a chapel. Actually, let me go back. Actually, they used it over the time. They had various purposes. They used it as classrooms, storage. And then I think in the 80s when they made it into a chapel. In the 90s, they brought the Adoration Chapel, and they made it a perpetual Adoration Chapel, and that was renovated last year as well.
Very good. And y'all, that is still round the clock? Y'all are able to?
Yeah. Well, we kind of curtail the hours, but it is from 5 a.m. in the morning to 11 p.m.
For security reasons, right?
Yeah, Monday through Sunday. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So that's another feature that I was not aware of that has come to this beautiful church as well. The stained glass window, I'm sorry.
I was going to explain about the choir loft.
Okay.
Yeah, the choir loft was in use for a long, long time, but as, I don't know if the viewers will be able to see it, but it's a spiral staircase. It's close to approximately third floor.
Wow, yeah,
And,
because these are very high ceilings.
and as our parishioners the choir members got a little older, it was much more difficult for them to climb up. So they made a new choir section on the right side where the St. Joseph statue is.
Okay. I know your windows here. It's interesting because there's a mix of windows and they date from different time periods and different artists.
That's right.
So I was just kind of researching some of them because they had this beautiful, in the old pictures you see this beautiful stained glass window on the front of the church, and as we mentioned earlier, that was blown out in, I think, a storm that came through in the 1920s. But some of these are from the Emerald Fry Studios in Munich, Germany, and others are from, I think it's Grenier, I'm going to say this wrong, Stiller. It was a company out of New Orleans, and so, but they're so varied because where they kept them intact, and then others are done in a totally different motif.
That's right.
So you do have beautiful windows, and I think they've actually had tour groups that have come through to look at the windows and study, what is here.
Right. We have no shortage of tour groups that come here and see this church. It's because, and a lot of folks, as you mentioned about the steeple, just stop by because they saw the steeple.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know what was here, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of nowhere, this huge church emerges out of the streets. So
It is. And, we're in a rural area, and there's not sky rises. A church
That's
like
right.
this in Baton Rouge or in New Orleans,
right.
you see them. But here, it does stand out, but in a great way, because you know, I didn't look for streets. I mean, I know them, but if I didn't, there's no trouble finding this place at all. We were just talking on break, and quite a few people, besides graduating from Ascension, some of our priests, there were two of our diocesan priests now who are native for here, and that's Father Phil Spano and Father Cleo Milano.
Right.
But they also, you were telling me several others too that graduated from Ascension
Right.
Catholic as well. Father Oob, you said, was one.
And Father Vincent Dufresne.
Vincent
had a
Dufresne.
background here as
So
well.
you see, so they've turned out quite a few priests, probably several nuns as well, but we
That's
we
right.
don't know about those.
That's right.
Looking back, when we were talking too, is the Italian culture here. Father Spano, Father Cleo Milano. The Italians that came to this area have quite a few devotions. They're very Catholic,
That's right.
and it's evident in the parish registers. They're a large part, or they were a large part of the community here. I don't know if they still are. I suspect they are,
They
because I
are.
saw your sign
Yeah.
for St. Joseph altar.
Yeah,
We're
men of our
approaching that time.
Yeah, men of our society, men of our parish has it called St. Joseph Society, and it's been in works since existence from 1900s.
Wow,
And
okay.
they have been they're promoting devotion to St. Joseph for a long time, but particularly I think what's been kind of signature mark of St. Joseph Society here in this parish is the St. Joseph Altar Day, where both the men and their wives are putting up this wonderful St. Joseph Altar Day and feed anybody who
That
arrives.
wants to come. Huh?
Last year, they fed 900 people.
Oh my goodness, that is
Yeah.
a large one.
And the way we do it now is that because both two parishes, Ascension and St. Francis, are clusters, we use St. Francis's parish hall and do our cooking and feeding of the altar there. Yeah.
Oh, good. What other ministries are active here? And tell me a little bit about the demographics of this parish.
Sure. This town is
families.
about, the population of Donaldsonville is about 8,000 people.
Okay.
And 70% is Caucasian and 30% is African American. And with that, we have various ministries to help for the social responsibilities. For example, we have a very active food pantry program.
Okay.
Every week we give out food. We also help out with the utilities every week. And then we named our social responsibility as Hands of Jesus.
Oh,
And so
okay.
far and wide range of ministries, including to the poor, to the elderly, to the needy, to the imprisoned. So we have ministry to the parish jail that's on this side of the river, which has about 500 inmates on this
Really?
side. Yeah.
Over here?
Yeah, the
Okay.
Ascension Parish Jail. Yeah.
Now, what is the actual, how many families do you have here?
I think right now it's about 600 families,
Okay.
and it's a much older population
Oh, that was
here.
my next question.
Yeah.
Is this an older population, or do we have young people coming in? It's pretty much an older.
It's an older population with the housing development that's happening across the river, and Pelican Point, Pelican Crossing, and that
Sure.
whole area. There's a movement of young people outside, out of this area right now. That's been happening.
Yeah, this is predominantly rural, but you do have plants, but
Right.
most of the plants are not located on
Right.
this side of the river.
Yeah.
The Dow is on this side,
That's right.
so most of the plants,
I
they have to
think
cross the river.
One of the most beautiful thing I think I thought to myself as I was driving around this whole area with the Bayou Lafourche is the sugarcane
Yes.
farms. It's just at the time when the stalks are so high, it's such a peaceful to see. And of course, the men in this area who work in the farms, once the grinding season hits in late October, I mean it is a round the clock work. And some of the priests here try to accommodate their schedule by having a 6 p.m. Mass on Sundays or early Mass on Sunday morning with them.
Yeah, I was raised with that because my grandfather is, my whole family raises sugarcane, so I'm familiar. But the very first sugarcane plantation to be established in Donaldsonville, I just know that because my family's in the sugar business, was 1807, and it was an Acadian farmer. I don't know his name, probably Landry, I'm pretty sure, because that's the predominant for the Donaldsonville area. And it has never left. So the sugar industry has been something that's always been here, been very predominant in this area. We've gone through slumps, and now it looks like it's on, the upswing. But we've been talking about everything here. With one thing I don't want to miss, and we're fixing to wind down, some of the work here. Y'all have the oldest and the biggest cemetery in our diocese that's been in continuous use pretty much on the same site. There's some discussion as to there were burials found under this church, but they really don't know if they were Chitimacha or if they were early Acadians or what.
Yeah.
But the cemetery is located, 2 blocks behind us?
Yeah, we have
or so?
what's called a Paradise Alley, which is a little street that goes from here to directly to the cemetery. Of course, after a while, I think the school ground was built on top of that Paradise Alley.
So the school intersects. The school is between us and
right.
them, part of the school.
That's right.
But folks, the cemetery it dates back again. Like I said, it's the oldest one, so it would date back to the 1770s.
Right.
Some of those tombs are gone. I know my ancestors that are here from that time period. We know where they are because of continuous use. But y'all have some magnificent tombs.
Right.
There's one for the Tomb of the Confederate Soldiers
Right.
that is dedicated strictly to those who served under Victor Morin, who was the commandant for that one. I only know that because I helped somebody research their family in that tomb. But the Branger family, all the famous plantations that are on the east bank, like Ashland, I think he was Homeless House. I'm not sure which ones they owned. Branger owned Tezcuco, I know, but his daughters owned all these others up and down that are still standing. The nuns there's a plot for the Daughters of Charity where they're buried in there. But, folks, it is a beautiful place to visit, let alone because some of these tombs were built by famous people. Henry Howard, the great architect that did Nottoway, he designed tombs in there. So it's worth a visit here. And if you're from South Louisiana, you're even halfway from this region, you probably have family members there, whether you know it or not. Is there anything else that strikes you? I remember bringing my grandmother here to wash her, her immediate family tomb.
The blessing of the graves on the All Saints Day. It just brings out just a lot of heritage here.
That is, and in our church records, our records for burials are only maybe 50 to 60% complete because back then they couldn't embalm, so there was no way. So we do know there's over 6,000 people buried in your cemetery.
Wow.
So we're ending on the end, as our lives would be in a cemetery, but we've run out of time. Thank you so much for being my guest today to tell us about this beautiful parish that you're here taking care of so well. And join us again, folks, for another episode of Roots of Faith.